Hello, my name is Eric Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today I'll be talking about what is consciousness. In non-duality and Advaita, consciousness is not that which arises from the brain. It does not arise from the mind. For in non-duality and Advaita, there is only one consciousness. It's not two. There's no second. And so it is one consciousness that is the doer and basically the consciousness of all body minds. Because in the West in particular we use a lot of different words and labels regarding consciousness, it sometimes gets confused. But you got to remember that in Advaita and non-duality, consciousness is equivalent to that, Brahman, self. It really doesn't matter. But consciousness is everything. Kind of like when you're dreaming at night. In a dream, there is nothing that is not consciousness. Everything arises from one consciousness. There's no one else in the dream. And so everything in the dream is not other than consciousness. And so the dream trees and plants and animals and other people, they're not other. They're not really separate. They're all of the one consciousness that created the entirety of the dream. And Advaita Vedanta and non-duality basically tries to use this illustration and say the waking world is like a dream. It's all consciousness. There is no other. There's no second. And so when you see or hear the term consciousness, do not confuse that with conscious awareness. Conscious awareness is tied to the body-mind. And that's why sometimes I'm asked, well, when I'm out and about during the day, I'm obviously conscious and aware of what's going on. But when I'm asleep or under anesthesia, I'm obviously unconscious, is what they'll ask me. And they go, well, how's this work? And that's sticking too close to conscious awareness, because consciousness envelops and includes all these forms of consciousness, be it conscious awareness, unconscious awareness, or superconscious awareness. The conscious, conscious, unconscious, superconscious is all one. It's all one thing in Advaita Vedanta. There's just consciousness. So when they talk about everything as consciousness, they're talking about the overall consciousness, not any specific piece. And that's why if you're talking about a specific piece, like you want to just talk about the conscious awareness of the body-mind, you might talk about conscious awareness. Or if you want to talk about that which the body-mind is not conscious of, yet still gets, the brain still remembers and registers all this extra data, then you have also unconscious awareness. And psychologists have talked about this, where, if you're in a big party or whatever, and you're asked, what did this woman wear at the party, you might not remember, because you weren't consciously paying attention, you weren't trying to remember, and so on a conscious level, you just don't recall. But if you're hypnotized and you're able to tap into the unconsciousness of the body-mind, you can recall almost perfectly the details that the conscious mind can't get, because conscious awareness is a small sliver of the data that is coming in through the senses. There is just too much for the body-mind to be aware of on a conscious level. You'd go into overload. And so it highlights usually that which changes, that which might be of danger, that which is of benefit, basically survival instincts mostly. But it keeps track of that, and everything else kind of goes into unconscious awareness and not really a conscious memory. But when you talk about consciousness and subconsciousness or unconsciousness, both of those make it sound like you're giving it a negative. On the flip side, there could be the positive. There's the superconscious. And superconscious awareness is that which is beyond the specific body-mind. Superconscious awareness is more of a, almost like a collective consciousness. And that's another term you hear in spirituality, collective consciousness. Well, consciousness in non-duality and Advaita is only the collective kind, because there is no other consciousness. There's nothing outside it. And so, do not fixate on conscious awareness of the body-mind when we're talking about consciousness. As such, you can't fixate on the conscious awareness of the body-mind, which fades or disappears under anesthesia or, say, death. They go, well, the death of the body, where does consciousness go? Well, consciousness didn't go anywhere. The entire show is consciousness. And so the same consciousness that, under the illusions of thought of the brain and the sensory awareness of a specific body mind that thought it was a me, is the exact same consciousness that is believing the exact same thing in another body. There's not two consciousnesses. There's not two consciousnesses. And as such, when the body dies, it has no impact on consciousness. Because sometimes I'm asked, well, how do you know if consciousness continues beyond the body's death? Well, if you think it is attached to the body in some way, again, you're thinking about conscious awareness. You're fixating on that aspect. And the conscious awareness of the body obviously fades when the body stops functioning, because conscious awareness is tied to this specific sensory brain situation. And once the brain quits working, that point of view of conscious awareness disappears. But that's not particularly important. It's kind of like a specific nerve cell of the eye dying off and being replaced. It doesn't particularly matter to the eye. A few hundred cells die in the eye, thousands over time. They get replaced by other cells. It doesn't matter. It doesn't impair the eye from functioning. Likewise, there are hundreds of thousands of people. I think actually it's 150 something thousand being born every day. It's like 2 a second almost. It's like 1.5, 2 a second for people born. And there's a slightly smaller number of deaths. I can't remember the exact figures. You can look it up on world population online or whatever, but there's all these new births, there's all these new deaths. It doesn't matter. There's only one consciousness, and it doesn't impair the one consciousness, whether there's these deaths or births. And so don't fixate on conscious awareness, which I think a lot of the questions I get about consciousness when people are talking about unconscious and deep sleep, or how do I know consciousness is forever even after death, or how is consciousness beyond the mind? All these questions are hinting that it's attached to the mind, that it doesn't go beyond death, that unconsciousness, when you're asleep, means you're not conscious. All this is basically variations of, I believe consciousness is only conscious awareness. And so when conscious awareness ceases, then I cease. And that's simply not true, because you are not conscious awareness. Conscious awareness is just the aspect of the specific body that this is. This body has its conscious awareness, its memories based on the experience gained. The viewer has, its body has its own conscious awareness and experience based on its experience, its memories. And that's all part of the body, but you are not the body. The body going doesn't matter. I mean, if it's kind of like if you were dreaming at night and you dreamt someone died in your dream, what was gained? What was lost? Nothing was gained or lost in a dream. Whatever happens in the dream, nothing is gained or lost. So if someone dies, nothing is lost in the dream. you witness a death in a dream, it didn't impact consciousness. Consciousness is exactly the same as it was during the entirety of the dream. And that's what you gotta, I guess, focus on, is this, it's rather impersonal, beyond a person consciousness, which does not arise due to the brain. If anything, the brain's more of a receiver. That might be a way to think of it, is you've got many radio receivers receiving the same signal from the one consciousness. And each body-mind has its own memory bank. And so it would only be aware of what that body has been experienced or aware of. But that has nothing to do with that which is kind of moving all the bodies, all the minds. Because again, if you think about a dream, regardless of what the dream is, the birds flying, people walking around, your interactions, it was all done by consciousness. The one consciousness is the doer of every action in the dream. And so if you dream you're being chased down an alley by someone, you're really chasing yourself. The consciousness playing the person being chased is the same consciousness playing the body that's chasing, which is the same consciousness that created the whole alley and everything else. Everything in the dream is consciousness. There's nothing other than consciousness. And that's what they mean in Advaita and Vedanta and non-duality when they say consciousness. They're talking about this consciousness which you are, which is the self, which is not other than Brahman. It is without circumference, unending. There's no other side. You need a circumference, and therefore an other side. But there's no other, and so there's no circumference. And as there is no circumference, there's no center. There's no center at all, because a center is determined by its circumference. And then you can find a center. But if there's no center, if there's no circumference, there's no center. They go together. And so consciousness is without circumference and center. It's not personal. It is the one behind everything, the doer of everything. And it's the same feeling of being that all beings share. That is consciousness. But I'm hoping that answered the questions of some of the viewers I was asked to make this video about consciousness. I know that on March 5th I am doing another Satsang online QA session. So if you're interested in that, you can look at the comments below for the Eventbrite link. And then also I'd like to welcome our new member, Barbara. Thank you for joining. And if you're interested in memberships, you can see the tag that's showing now. But if you have any questions, comments, please post below. I always like interacting with viewers. If you want to share the video, feel free to share. But until next time, thank you much.